My name is Wendelin, and I'm 36 years old. I built a successful software company in Seattle that no one in my family knew about until last year. Growing up, I always lived in my younger sister Jenna's shadow. Our parents made their preference obvious from day one, but nothing prepared any of us for that dramatic family dinner when my $12 million net worth was accidentally revealed. The look on my sister's face before her full-blown meltdown was something I'll never forget. Before I get into how this all unfolded, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. Hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever felt overlooked by someone who should have valued you. Now let me take you back to where it all began. I grew up in a cozy middle-class neighborhood in Portland with tree-lined streets and families who gathered for summer barbecues. My parents, David and Martha, worked steady jobs, my father in insurance, my mother as an elementary school teacher. From the outside, we looked like the perfect American family, four of us in a three-bedroom ranch house with a golden retriever named Rusty. But inside those walls, the dynamics were anything but equal. The favoritism toward my sister Jenna started before I could even recognize what was happening. Jenna was born when I was 3, and from the home videos I've seen, the difference in how my parents looked at us was obvious. With me, there was care and duty. With Jenna, there was sparkle in their eyes. As we grew older, the differences became more tangible. When it came time for back-to-school shopping, Jenna would get a completely new wardrobe, brand-name clothes with the tag still attached. I'd get her hand-me-downs or the bare minimum of new items, always from discount stores. My mother would say, "Wendelin is practical, she doesn't care about clothes," without ever asking if that was true. When I had piano recitals, debate competitions, or science fairs, my parents had a remarkable talent for having scheduling conflicts. "We'll make the next one," they'd promise, but the next one would come and go with empty seats where they should have been. Meanwhile, they never missed a single one of Jenna's soccer games, dance recitals, or school plays. They'd arrive early to get the best seats, cameras ready. Our home told the same story. The living room walls featured dozens of framed photos of Jenna scoring goals, Jenna at dance competitions, Jenna's school portraits. My achievements, certificates, academic awards, coding competition wins were neatly tucked away in a drawer. "We don't want to make Jenna feel bad that she's not as academic," my mother explained once, as though protecting Jenna's feelings was the priority, never mine. The only person who seemed to see me for who I was my grandmother, Margaret, my father's mother. She lived about 30 minutes away, and those Saturday afternoons at her house became my sanctuary. Unlike my parents, Grandma Margaret listened when I talked about my interest in computers. She saved newspaper clippings about women in technology and would mail them to me with little notes saying, "This could be you someday, Wendelin." While Jenna was the quintessential popular girl, pretty, athletic, socially adept, I was quiet and analytical. I got lost in books and computer programs while she collected friends and trophies. By middle school, I had taught myself basic programming languages, creating simple games and websites that fascinated me but earned only passing interest from my parents. "That's nice, honey," my mother would say with a distracted glance at my computer screen before turning her full attention to Jenna's latest social drama or sports achievement. "Did you see what your sister made? She's so creative." They'd gush over a standard art project while my functioning website that took weeks to code warranted barely a nod. The most painful memory from those years happened when I turned 16. I'd been dropping hints for months about a specific laptop I wanted, a fairly expensive model, but I had researched it extensively and knew it would help with the programming courses I was taking. My birthday arrived and my parents gave me a generic card with $25 inside. "We know you're saving up for something," they said before quickly moving on to discuss Jenna's upcoming 13th birthday party, which I later learned they'd been planning for months and would cost over $500. That night, I overheard them talking in the kitchen when they thought I was asleep. "Jenna just makes it so easy to be her parent," my mother said. "She's so open with her feelings, so affectionate." "Wendelin has always been different," my father replied, sighing. "So difficult to read, so contained. I never know what she's thinking." "She's always been self-sufficient," my mother added, as though my independence at 16 was a character flaw rather than a survival skill I'd developed from years of emotional neglect. I retreated to my room and cried silently into my pillow, careful not to make a sound. That night, I made a promise to myself I would build my own future one where I wouldn't need their approval or support. I doubled down on coding, staying late after school to use the computer lab, since we only had one family computer at home, which Jenna often monopolized for social media and school projects. Programming became more than a hobby. It became my escape, my future, and the one place where I felt completely in control. When the code worked, it was because I made it work. There were no favorites in the world of programming, just solutions that functioned and those that didn't. In that binary world, I found comfort that my family life never provided. The day I left for college was both terrifying and exhilarating. I had earned a partial scholarship to the University of Washington, and with student loans and a work-study program I could afford to attend without asking my parents for money. Meanwhile, Jenna had been accepted to Greenfield College, a private school with a hefty price tag that my parents happily agreed to pay in full. The contrast in our send-offs was stark. My parents drove Jenna to campus in our family SUV packed to the brim with new bedding decorations, a mini fridge, a television, and a brand new laptop. They spent the weekend helping her set up her dorm room, meeting her roommate, and taking her shopping for anything she might have forgotten. For my departure, my father dropped me off at the bus station with 2 suitcases. "Call us when you get there," he said, giving me an awkward side hug before heading back to the car. I took a 15-hour bus ride to Seattle, then navigated public transportation to campus with everything I owned in those 2 bags. My assigned roommate Aisha was already settling in when I arrived. She took one look at me struggling with my luggage and immediately jumped up to help. "Where's the rest of your stuff?" she asked, looking behind me for parents or more boxes. "This is it," I replied with a shrug, trying to sound nonchalant. Aisha gave me a long look before saying, "Well, my parents brought way too much stuff for me. Want to help me unpack, and you can have whatever duplicates we find." That simple act of generosity marked the beginning of what would become the most significant friendship of my life. Aisha was studying business and had a warmth and openness that put me instantly at ease. For the first time, I felt seen and valued just for being me. As weeks turned into months, I discovered that college was everything high school wasn't. In my computer science classes, I wasn't the odd one out for being passionate about coding. I found my people, other students who got excited about solving problems and building software. Professors who recognized my potential and pushed me to achieve more. For the first time in my life, my abilities were not just acknowledged but celebrated. I secured an internship with a local tech company during my sophomore year while working part-time at the campus coffee shop to make ends meet. Meanwhile, Jenna was struggling to maintain a C average at her expensive college, frequently calling home for more money for sorority fees, spring break trips, and shopping sprees. Our phone calls home highlighted the continuing disparity. When I called, my parents would ask a few cursory questions about my classes before inevitably steering the conversation to Jenna. "Your sister is having such a hard time with her biology professor," or "Jenna's made so many friends in her sorority." Any mention of my achievements was met with distracted acknowledgement at best. Thanksgiving break of my sophomore year was particularly painful. I had scraped together enough money for a flight home, expecting at least some interest in my college experience. Instead, the entire weekend revolved around Jenna and her new boyfriend, a business major from a wealthy family. "Isn't he wonderful?" my mother kept saying while my father discussed potential business connections through the boyfriend's family. My Dean's List achievement and new internship received a brief, "That's great, honey," before conversation swiftly returned to Jenna's social life. By Christmas break, the resentment I'd been suppressing for years finally boiled over. After another dinner spent listening to Jenna complain about how stressful it was to maintain her active social calendar. While my parents nodded sympathetically, I finally spoke up. "Do you realize that you've spent the entire break talking about Jenna's parties while I've been working 2 jobs on top of a full course load and making the Dean's List?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly. The silence that followed was deafening. Then my mother said, "Don't be dramatic, Gwendolyn. We've asked about your classes." "No, you haven't," I countered. "You asked where I'm living and if I need money, which I don't because I've been supporting myself. You haven't asked a single question about my internship or what I'm actually learning." My father frowned. "I think you're being a bit sensitive. We're interested in both of you equally." Jenna rolled her eyes. "See, this is why no one asks you questions. You always make everything so uncomfortable." And that night, I applied for a summer research opportunity that would keep me on campus rather than returning home. It was competitive, but my professor had encouraged me to apply, seeing potential in me that my family never had. When I received the acceptance letter 2 months later, I felt nothing but relief at having a valid reason to stay away. It was during those quiet summer months, working late into the night in nearly empty computer labs, that the seed of my future business began to form. I identified a gap in how small businesses were handling customer relationship management, too complex for simple solutions, but unable to afford enterprise-level software. I started coding a prototype that would eventually become my company's flagship product. My graduation day should have been triumphant. I had completed my degree with honors, secured a job at a promising tech startup in Seattle, and had already developed a working prototype of my software idea. My parents and Jenna attended, but their enthusiasm felt obligatory rather than genuine. "We're proud of you," my mother said mechanically as she straightened my cap, her eyes already scanning the crowd for more interesting people to talk to. After the ceremony, they spent most of our celebration lunch discussing Jenna's upcoming senior year and how, despite her mediocre grades, she was really finding herself through her sorority leadership position. When I tried to explain my new job, my father interrupted to ask if the startup offered good health insurance and retirement benefits. "It's a startup, Dad," I explained. "The benefits are the equity and experience." He exchanged a concerned look with my mother. "Well, I hope you'll look for something more stable soon. Not everyone can afford to take risks." The irony that they had financially supported Jenna through 5 years of college. She had needed an extra year to complete her degree while I had worked and taken out loans wasn't lost on me. But I had learned long ago that pointing out these disparities only led to being labeled difficult. After graduation, Aisha and I found a small apartment in Seattle to share. She had secured a marketing position at a mid-sized company, and we were excited to start our adult lives together. The apartment was nothing special, a 2-bedroom walk-up with outdated appliances and questionable water pressure, but it was ours, and it was far from Portland. My job at the tech startup was intense and educational. I worked directly under the CTO, a brilliant woman named Taylor, who had built several successful companies. The hours were long, but I absorbed everything like a sponge, making mental notes of what worked and what didn't in the startup environment. It was during this time that I met Jackson, a senior developer who would become both mentor and friend. Unlike most people in my life, Jackson saw my potential immediately. "You think differently," he told me after I'd proposed an alternative solution to a problem the team had been struggling with for weeks. "Most people follow established patterns, but you see possibilities they miss." With Jackson's encouragement, I continued developing my own software on nights and weekends. My concept had evolved into a flexible CRM system specifically designed for service-based small businesses like law firms, medical practices, and consulting companies. After 6 months, I had a functioning prototype that I tested with a few local businesses who provided valuable feedback. During this period, my parents would call occasionally, but the conversations followed a predictable pattern. They'd ask surface-level questions about my job before launching into lengthy updates about Jenna's latest achievements or challenges. Often the calls ended with requests for tech support, helping them reset passwords or explain why their printer wasn't working. After 18 months at the startup, I made the terrifying decision to quit and focus on my own company full-time. I had saved enough to cover about 6 months of bare-bones living expenses, and Aisha had agreed to let me defer part of my rent if needed. When I called to tell my parents about my decision, their response was predictably discouraging. "Is that really wise?" my mother asked. "In this economy, most startups fail, you know," my father added. "What about your retirement savings?" Meanwhile, they had just helped Jenna put a down payment on a condo after she'd landed an entry-level marketing job, seeing it as a smart investment in her future. The first year of running my own company was the hardest year of my life. I ate ramen noodles almost exclusively, worked 16-hour days, slept on a futon in my tiny office to save commuting time, and battled constant doubt. Aisha would bring me groceries and force me to take breaks, reminding me that working yourself to death won't make your company succeed any faster. The breakthrough came when a regional accounting firm agreed to try my software. Their positive experience led to referrals, and suddenly I had enough customers to hire my first employee, a programmer named May, who believed in the vision enough to take a salary well below market rate. From there, growth came steadily. Jackson left the startup to join my company as CTO. We secured a small round of angel investment that allowed us to hire more developers and a sales team. 2 years in, we had 15 employees and were actually turning a profit, a rarity in the software startup world. When we received our first acquisition offer, $3 million from a larger tech company, I was tempted. It was more money than I'd ever imagined having. But after careful consideration and discussions with my team, I declined. We were just getting started, and I believed the company could grow much larger. As the business expanded, I finally moved out of my shared apartment with Aisha and bought a modest one-bedroom condo in a nice Seattle neighborhood. I furnished it simply, but with quality pieces that would last. When my parents asked about my new place during one of our infrequent calls, I simply said I had found a nice rental. I had learned that any sign of financial success would only lead to uncomfortable questions or expectations. Around this time, Jenna got engaged to her college boyfriend, and my parents threw themselves into wedding planning with gusto. The wedding would cost nearly $50,000, a fact my mother mentioned repeatedly during our calls, often with a pointed addition about how they were stretching themselves thin to give Jenna her dream day. At the wedding, I was seated at a table with distant cousins I barely knew, while family friends and relatives I had grown up with were placed at premium tables near the bridal party. It was a small slight, but it stung nonetheless, another reminder of my place in the family hierarchy. After the wedding, my company continued to thrive. We expanded to 50 employees and moved to larger offices. Our software now served clients across the country, from small local businesses to regional chains with multiple locations. I was approached by industry publications for interviews, spoke at tech conferences, and was even featured in a Women in Tech to Watch article that thankfully my family never saw. When the second acquisition offer came in $12 million, I was ready to accept. I had built something valuable, proven my concept, and was ready for a new challenge. The deal included retention bonuses for key employees and allowed me to stay on as a consultant for 2 years to ensure a smooth transition. Overnight, I became a multimillionaire. The money hit my bank account on a Tuesday. On Wednesday, life continued as normal. I went to work, had lunch with Aisha, and called my grandmother. I told no one about the acquisition except my closest friends and my financial advisor. I decided to keep my wealth private, especially from my family. It wasn't about revenge or withholding, it was about protection. I had worked too hard to have my achievement diminished, or worse, to become an ATM for family members who had never believed in me. My father's 65th birthday coincided with the final paperwork for the acquisition. My mother had planned a small family dinner that, according to her, would be just us, though I suspected this was more about convenience than any desire to spend time with me specifically. I arrived at their house, a modest suburban home unchanged since my childhood, exactly on time. My mother greeted me with a distracted hug, immediately following it with, "Jenna and Mark are running late. You know how busy they are with their jobs." The house was exactly as I remembered it, from the faded family photos featuring Jenna's accomplishments to the worn furniture arranged in the same configuration it had been in for 20 years. The only new additions were photos of Jenna's wedding prominently displayed on the mantel. "Can I help with anything?" I asked, following my mother into the kitchen. No, I've got it all under control," she replied, though she was clearly flustered, juggling multiple dishes. "There's wine in the living room if you want to pour yourself a glass." My father was watching a baseball game in his recliner. He gave me a brief nod when I entered. "Gwendolyn, good to see you made it." "Happy birthday, Dad," I said, handing him a carefully wrapped package containing a rare first edition of his favorite author's book, something I'd spent months tracking down. "Thanks," he said, setting it aside without opening it. We'll do gifts after dinner when everyone's here. 20 minutes later, the doorbell rang and my parents sprang into action as though the president had arrived. My mother rushed to the door while my father turned off the TV and stood up straightening his shirt. "They're here!" my mother called out unnecessarily as Jenna and her husband Mark swept in. Hugs, exclamations, and a flurry of attention followed. "Look at you two," my mother gushed. "You look exhausted, honey. Work must be so demanding." "It is." Jenna sighed dramatically. "The promotion means more responsibility. I barely have time to breathe." "But the money must be better, right?" my father asked, leading them into the living room. "A little," Jenna shrugged. "Not enough for the stress, honestly." Throughout the appetizers' conversation revolved entirely around Jenna's job, Jenna's house renovations, and Jenna's plans for an upcoming vacation. When I asked Mark about his work, Jenna interrupted to continue her story about a difficult client. I nodded and smiled at appropriate intervals, playing the role I'd perfected over the years, the supportive sister who expected nothing. I asked thoughtful questions about their lives and received virtually none about mine in return. "So, Wendelin," my mother finally said during a lull, "how's your job still at that same company?" Before I could answer, Jenna jumped in. "Oh my God, Mom, you wouldn't believe what happened at work yesterday." And just like that, the brief window of interest in my life slammed shut. As we moved to the main course, Jenna began complaining about their mortgage payments and the cost of the renovations they wanted to do. "Houses are such money pits," she sighed, looking pointedly at our parents. "And the interest rates are killing us." My father nodded sympathetically. "Well, your mother and I have been talking, and with my retirement coming up—" "You're retiring?" I interjected, surprised by this news. "Yes, at the end of the year," he confirmed before turning back to Jenna. "As I was saying, we've been discussing how we might be able to help you two out a bit. Nothing major, but maybe we could contribute to your kitchen renovation as a Christmas gift." "That would be amazing," Jenna exclaimed, clapping her hands together. I felt a familiar twinge of hurt, but pushed it down. At 36, I was long past expecting equal treatment. As we ate, my phone began buzzing repeatedly in my pocket. I tried to ignore it, but after the 5th consecutive notification, I grew concerned that something might be wrong with the acquisition. "Excuse me," I said, standing up. "I need to take this. It might be important." My mother frowned. "At dinner? Can't it wait?" "It'll just take a minute." I promised, stepping out onto the back porch for privacy. It was my lawyer calling with the final confirmation that the acquisition payment had been processed successfully. All $12 million had been transferred to my accounts. "Congratulations," he said. "You're officially a very wealthy woman." I thanked him, trying to keep my voice down, and quickly went through a few logistical questions about tax implications and next steps. As I ended the call, I turned to find Jenna standing in the doorway, her expression unreadable. "Everything okay?" I asked, sliding my phone back into my pocket. "Fine," she said tightly. "Mom sent me to check on you. Dinner's getting cold." We returned to the table in awkward silence. Throughout dessert, Jenna's favorite cake, of course, I noticed her watching me with an unusual intensity, her eyes narrowed in suspicion. As my father was opening his gifts, Jenna suddenly put down her fork with a clatter that made everyone turn toward her. "So," she said, her voice sharp, "were you going to tell us about the money or just keep pretending you're still a nobody?" The table fell silent. My stomach dropped as I realized what had happened. "What money?" my mother asked, looking between us in confusion. Jenna's eyes never left mine. "I heard her on the phone. Apparently our struggling sister is actually loaded. $12 million. Is that what I heard correctly? Wendelin." My father's birthday gift from my mother, now a forgotten heap of wrapping paper, sat in front of him. "What is she talking about?" he demanded. I took a deep breath, wishing I could disappear. "My company was acquired. The deal just finalized today." "For $12 million, my mother gasped. "And you never thought to mention this?" My father added, his tone accusatory rather than proud. Jenna's initial shock had rapidly transformed into something darker. Her face flushed red as she stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "All this time," she spat. All this time you've been sitting there listening to me worry about money, about our mortgage, about renovations, and you're secretly some kind of millionaire. It just happened, I said calmly, though my heart was racing. The deal literally closed today. But your company, my mother interjected. You've had it for years. Why didn't you tell us it was doing so well? Because it wasn't relevant, I replied honestly. This was apparently the wrong thing to say. Jenna's face contorted with rage. Not relevant, she shouted. How is having millions of dollars not relevant to your family, unless you don't consider us family anymore now that you're rich and successful? That's not what I meant. I tried to explain, but Jenna was beyond listening. All these years, she continued, her voice rising, I thought you were just the boring sister with the boring tech job. Poor Wendelin, no social life, no husband, just her computers. And all along you were building some empire, making millions while pretending to be ordinary. She began pacing the dining room, gesticulating wildly. And you let Mom and Dad help me with the down payment on my house when you could have easily paid for the whole thing yourself. You sat there at my wedding at the budget venue we chose to save money while you could have given me a dream wedding. Jenna, calm down, Mark said, reaching for her arm, which she yanked away. No, I will not calm down, she shouted, grabbing my mother's favorite crystal vase from the sideboard and hurling it across the room. It shattered against the wall, water and flowers spraying across the carpet. My parents both jumped up, rushing to Jenna rather than addressing the destruction. Honey, please, my mother pleaded, trying to embrace her. Let's just talk about this. Jenna shook her off. Talk. Now you want to talk. Where was all this talking when you were helping me with bills that Wendelin could have easily covered? Did she ever offer? Did she ever once think about anyone but herself? I remained seated, a strange calm washing over me despite the chaos. I worked for every dollar I earned, I said quietly. I built my company while working full-time, taking no salary for the first 2 years. I lived on ramen noodles and slept in my office to make it work. No one helped me, no down payments, no paid tuition, no family connections. My words hung in the air. For a brief moment, I thought I saw a flicker of understanding in my father's eyes, quickly replaced by his default expression of disapproval. So that's it, Jenna asked, her voice suddenly quiet, and all the more dangerous for it. You're punishing us for not believing in you, for not understanding your precious computer stuff. This is revenge. No, I said firmly. This is me building my own life on my own terms. I don't owe anyone an explanation for my success, nor am I obligated to share it. Jenna stared at me for a long moment before grabbing her purse. I can't believe I wasted 33 years thinking you were just a socially awkward nerd when really you're a cold-hearted bitch. She stormed out the front door, slamming behind her. Mark stood awkwardly, looking between my parents and me. I'm sorry, he said stiffly. She's just shocked. I should go after her. After he left, the dining room fell into a stunned silence. My mother was quietly crying, kneeling to pick up pieces of the shattered vase. My father stood with his arms crossed, looking at me as though I had been the one to throw it. I should go, I said, gathering my purse and keys. Yes, my father agreed coldly. I think that would be best. I cried the entire drive back to Seattle, tears blurring the highway lights. Not because of Jenna's outburst that was predictable enough, but because of what it represented. 36 years of emotional investment in people who had never truly seen me, never valued me for who I was. 36 years of hoping that someday, somehow I would earn enough of their love to be treated as an equal. The realization that money, the very thing I had never cared much about, was what finally made them take notice of me, was the ultimate heartbreak. For the next week, my phone remained silent. No calls from my parents, not even to check if I had made it home safely. No apologies, no follow-up, nothing. I threw myself into work finalizing transition details with the acquiring company and helping my team adjust to the new corporate structure. Aisha brought dinner to my condo one night, concern evident in her expression. You haven't been answering my texts, she said. What happened at your dad's birthday? I broke down and told her everything. The eavesdropping, the confrontation, the shattered vase, the silence that followed. She listened without interrupting, then pulled me into a fierce hug. "They don't deserve you," she said firmly. "They never have." 8 days after the dinner, my father finally called. Instead of an apology, he launched immediately into accusations. "How could you keep something like this from us?" he demanded without preamble. "We're your family." "Hello to you too, Dad," I replied, trying to keep my voice even. "Your mother is devastated," he continued. "She thinks you don't trust us." "This isn't about trust," I explained. "My success is mine." I didn't feel the need to broadcast it. But $12 million, Wendelin, that's not just success, it's life-changing money that could help the whole family. There it was, the real issue. Not that I hadn't shared the news, but that I hadn't shared the money. "I need to go, Dad. I have a meeting." 2 days later, my parents showed up unannounced at my condo. When the concierge called up to announce their arrival, I nearly told him to send them away. But some deeply ingrained sense of obligation made me agree to let them up. Their expressions when they entered my home, a modern, spacious condo with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lake Union, were a mixture of awe and betrayal. This was the first time they had seen where I actually lived, having always met at restaurants or their home on my infrequent visits to Portland. "So, this is how you live," my mother said, running her hand over the quartz countertop in my kitchen. "All this time." "I bought this place after the first round of funding," I explained. "It was a good investment." My father was examining the view. "Must have cost a fortune." "Can I get you something to drink?" I offered, trying to maintain some semblance of normal hospitality. They declined, and we moved to the living room, sitting in uncomfortable silence until my father finally spoke. "We need to talk about what happened at dinner," he said, his tone suggesting I was a misbehaving child rather than a successful adult. "I agree," I replied. Jenna's reaction was completely inappropriate. She was shocked. My mother defended immediately. "We all were. Finding out your sister is some secret millionaire isn't exactly an everyday occurrence." I took a deep breath. "I understand it was surprising news. What I don't understand is why the reaction was anger rather than happiness for me." "Because you hid it from us," my father exclaimed. "Family doesn't keep secrets like that." "Family," I said carefully, "is supposed to support each other equally. Has that been your experience of our family, Dad?" This caught him off guard. "What are you talking about?" "Of course we've supported you." "Have you?" I asked quietly. "When was the last time you attended any event that mattered to me? When did you ever prioritize my needs or interests over Jenna's? When did you ever really see me for who I am, rather than just the quiet daughter who didn't demand attention?" My mother's face flushed. "That's not fair, Wendelin. You were always so independent, so self-sufficient. Jenna needed us more." "She didn't need you more," I corrected. "You chose to give her more. There's a difference." "That's ridiculous," my father scoffed. "We treated you both the same." "Did you? When Jenna turned 16, you bought her a car. When I turned 16, you gave me $25 in a card and forgot to make dinner plans." My mother frowned. "That's not how I remember it." "Of course not," I said, "because you've spent years convincing yourselves that your obvious favoritism was just a response to our different personalities, that I somehow needed or wanted less love, less attention, less support." "We gave you everything you needed," my father insisted. "No, you gave me the minimum required to not feel like completely terrible parents. Food, shelter, clothing. But emotional support, recognition, equal treatment. Those were reserved for Jenna." My mother's eyes filled with tears. "We never meant to make you feel that way." "Intention doesn't change impact," I said softly. And the impact was that I grew up feeling invisible in my own home. An uncomfortable silence fell. My father, ever practical, decided to change tactics. "Look, what's done is done. We can't change the past. But now that we know about your situation, don't you think you should help your sister? Their mortgage is really stretching them thin, and with your resources, it would be nothing to you." I stared at him in disbelief. After everything I had just shared, his conclusion was that I should give Jenna money. No, I said firmly. I will not be funding Jenna's lifestyle. My financial success doesn't create an obligation to support my adult sister, who has every advantage in life. But that's what family does, my mother protested. We help each other. Where was that help when I was working 3 jobs to put myself through college? I asked. Where was that help when I was sleeping on my office floor trying to get my company off the ground? Where was the offer to contribute to my down payment? My parents exchanged uncomfortable glances, unable to answer. The difference between Jenna and me, I continued, is that she expects help and I expect to work for what I have. I'm not going to enable her entitlement by becoming her personal bank. My father stood up, his face flushed with anger. I don't recognize you anymore. Money has changed you. I laughed without humor. No, Dad. Money just gave me the confidence to finally say what I've always felt. My mother was openly crying now. I always knew, she admitted quietly. I saw how we treated you differently. I noticed. But Jenna was so demanding, so emotional, and you were so capable. It was easier to focus on her because you never seemed to need us. I told myself that was okay, that different children need different things. I never thought about how it felt for you. Her admission stunned me. It was the first time either parent had acknowledged the disparity in their treatment. My father, however, wasn't ready for such self-reflection. This is ridiculous. We gave you both good lives. If you've been harboring all this resentment, that's on you, not us. David, my mother said sharply, stop. Just stop and listen for once. Another first, my mother challenging my father's dismissal of my feelings. They left shortly after the conversation, having reached an impasse. My father still defensive, my mother confused and emotional. As the door closed behind them, I felt drained, but also strangely liberated. I had finally spoken my truth after decades of silence. That evening, Aisha called to check in. How are you holding up? She asked. Honestly, better than I expected, I replied. It's like lancing a boil, 30 years of festering hurt finally released. I'm proud of you, she said simply. The next day, I received a lengthy email from Jenna. The subject line read, "My fair share" in all capitals. The content was a rambling list of demands, including paying off her mortgage, funding her renovations, and providing a sisterly stipend so she could reduce her work hours. No apology for her behavior, no acknowledgement of my achievement, just entitlement wrapped in accusations of selfishness. I didn't respond, which triggered a barrage of increasingly hostile text messages. I blocked her number after the third one, threatening to tell everyone what a horrible sister you really are. That weekend, I made my first appointment with a therapist. I had spent years building a successful company, but had neglected to address the emotional damage from my childhood. It was time to invest in my psychological well-being as carefully as I had invested in my business. For the next 3 months, I maintained minimal contact with my family. My mother would text occasionally with cautious questions about my work or general well-being. My father remained silent. Jenna, having been blocked from my phone, had taken to social media, posting vague but pointed comments about selfish people who only care about money. Meanwhile, I was making progress in therapy. Lyndon, a warm but no-nonsense woman in her 50s, helped me understand that the dynamics in my family weren't my fault, and that I couldn't fix them alone. Your success, she told me during one session, is threatening to them because it disrupts the narrative they've built that Jenna is the star and you're the supporting character. Their worldview doesn't allow for you to outshine her. I never wanted to outshine anyone, I protested. I just wanted to be valued equally. I know, she said gently. But families develop rigid roles, and when someone steps out of their assigned role, even in positive ways, it creates discomfort. Through our weekly sessions, I began to see how my childhood had shaped my adult behaviors, my tendency to overwork, my difficulty accepting praise, my habit of making myself smaller in social situations to avoid attention. I also recognized the strength I had developed as a result of those same experiences. My self-reliance, determination, and empathy for others who felt overlooked. During this period of reflection, I had lunch with my grandmother, Margaret, the one family member who had always believed in me. At 84, she was still sharp as ever, her eyes twinkling with the same curiosity about the world that had drawn me to her as a child. "I always knew you'd do something remarkable," she said, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. "From the time you were little, you had a quality about you, a determination that your parents misread as stubbornness." "Did they tell you what happened?" I asked. "Bits and pieces." She nodded. "Your mother called quite upset. Your father has been suspiciously quiet." "And Jenna," Grandmother Margaret's mouth tightened. "Jenna has been telling anyone who will listen that you're hoarding your wealth and refusing to help family." I told her that perhaps she should examine why she feels entitled to money she didn't earn. I couldn't help but smile. Grandmother Margaret had never been one to mince words. "What should I do?" I asked her, realizing how much I still valued her guidance despite being a successful adult. "Set boundaries," she said firmly. "Clear, loving boundaries. You can't change how they see you, but you can decide what behavior you're willing to accept in your life." Taking her advice, I spent a weekend drafting a letter to my parents. Not an email or text, something thoughtful and tangible that required effort, just as rebuilding our relationship would require effort. In it, I explained how their treatment had affected me growing up, acknowledged that they had done the best they knew how at the time, and outlined what I needed moving forward to have a healthy relationship with them. I ended the letter with, "I don't need or want apologies for the past. What I want is recognition of who I am now and respect for the boundaries I set. I love you both and am open to building a new type of relationship, one between adults who value each other, rather than parents who favor one child, and an adult daughter still seeking approval." 2 weeks later, my parents requested to meet at a neutral location, a coffee shop halfway between Portland and Seattle. I agreed with both hope and trepidation. My mother arrived first, looking nervous but determined. My father joined us shortly after, his expression unreadable. After ordering coffee, we sat at a corner table away from other customers. "We got your letter," my mother began. "It was difficult to read." "But necessary," my father added, surprising me. "I didn't want to come today. I wanted to dismiss everything you wrote as exaggeration, but your mother insisted we really hear you out." "I meant what I wrote," I said. "I'm not looking to rehash old hurts. I want to move forward, but only if things can be different." "We've talked a lot since your visit," my mother said, "about how we raised you girls, about the differences in how we treated you. I won't pretend we didn't favor Jenna. Looking back, it's painfully obvious." My father shifted uncomfortably. "It wasn't intentional," he insisted. "Jenna was just so present, so demanding of attention. You were quiet, capable. We thought you were fine." "I understand that," I said, "but understanding doesn't erase the impact." My mother nodded. "We know, and we're trying to do better now even though you're an adult. It's why we wanted to meet in person instead of just calling." "What about Jenna?" I asked. "She's still sending messages through extended family, still expecting me to fund her lifestyle." My father sighed. "We've tried talking to her. She's struggling with this change in the family dynamic. She's always been the center, and now suddenly there's this shift." "We did that to her," my mother acknowledged. "We created this expectation that her needs would always come first. It's not entirely her fault that she can't accept a different reality." This acknowledgement from my mother, another first, felt like a breakthrough. She was accepting their role in creating not just my pain, but Jenna's entitlement. "I can't have a relationship with her right now," I said honestly. "Not while she's demanding money and spreading falsehoods about me." "We understand," my mother said. "We're not asking you to reconcile with her until she makes significant changes." My father, who had been relatively quiet, finally spoke up. "I want to say something. I was wrong. About a lot of things. But especially about your business. What you've built is impressive. I didn't understand it, still don't fully, but I'm proud of what you've accomplished. I should have said that first before anything else." The words I had waited decades to hear. They brought unexpected tears to my eyes. "Thank you," I said simply. "We established some basic agreements that day. I would not discuss my finances with them, and they would not bring up Jenna's financial needs. We would communicate regularly, but with the understanding that I might need to establish firmer boundaries if old patterns emerged. And perhaps most importantly, they would respect that my time and emotional energy were valuable, just as they had always respected Jenna's. Jenna refused all attempts at mediation or family discussions. For 3 more months, she maintained her position that I was obligated to share my wealth with her. Extended family members began calling me with awkward requests to consider helping your sister out for family peace. I politely but firmly declined each time. The first family dinner after our coffee shop meeting was tense but significant. Held at a restaurant in Seattle without Jenna, it was the first time my parents had visited specifically to see me, not as an afterthought or obligation. The conversation was stilted at times, with decades of patterns hard to break, but there were moments of genuine connection that gave me hope. As my mother was telling a story about her book club, she caught herself after spending several minutes on a tangent and said, "I'm sorry I've been going on about this. Gwendolyn, tell us about your week." It was a small thing but significant, the conscious effort to create space for me in the conversation. My father, too, made efforts asking questions about my work and actually listening to the answers, instead of just waiting for his turn to speak. It wasn't perfect, and I didn't expect it to be. Real change would take time. But for the first time, I felt a glimmer of hope that we might eventually build the family relationship I had always longed for. 1 year after the fateful dinner that exposed my financial status, much had changed in my family dynamics. My relationship with my parents had evolved into something I wouldn't have recognized before, cautious but genuine, with moments of real connection, interspersed with occasional backsliding into old patterns. My mother had made the most progress actively working to know me as a person, rather than just her other daughter. She would send me articles about women in technology or books she thought I might enjoy, small gestures that showed she was paying attention to my interests. My father tried in his own way, though decades of emotional distance were harder for him to overcome. The most surprising development came 6 months after our confrontation, when Jenna finally agreed to attend a family therapy session. What motivated this change of heart wasn't some grand epiphany about family harmony, but practical reality. Her husband had grown tired of her obsession with my money and threatened separation if she didn't address her fixation. That first session was uncomfortable, to say the least. Jenna sat stiffly on the opposite side of the room, arms crossed defensively. When the therapist asked why we were there, Jenna immediately launched into a litany of complaints about my selfishness and how I had abandoned the family once I became successful. I listened without interrupting, practicing the techniques Dr. Linden had taught me. When it was my turn to speak, I kept my comments focused on my experience rather than attacking Jenna's perspective. "I understand you feel hurt and excluded," I acknowledged. "From your viewpoint, I suddenly had resources I wasn't sharing. From my viewpoint, I had spent my entire life being treated as less important, less valuable, less worthy of investment than you. When I finally achieved success through my own efforts, the first reaction wasn't pride or happiness for me. It was anger that I wasn't using that success to benefit you." Jenna's response was predictably defensive, but the therapist skillfully guided the conversation away from accusations and toward underlying emotions. By the end of the session, little had been resolved, but at least we had managed to sit in the same room without a screaming match. Over subsequent months, Jenna's attitude began to shift, though not without setbacks. The turning point came when she lost her job, a direct result of her declining performance, as she became increasingly consumed with resentment toward me. Suddenly, her theoretical financial concerns became very real. In a moment of unexpected vulnerability during our fourth therapy session, she admitted, "I don't know who I am if I'm not the successful one. That was always my role, the social one, the popular one, the one everyone liked. If Gwendolyn is successful and respected and has money, what do I have?" It was a profound insight into how our parents' favoritism had damaged not just me, but Jenna as well, creating an identity for her that was dependent on being the center of attention and special treatment. When Jenna reluctantly mentioned she was considering a career change but couldn't afford additional education, I made a decision. I wouldn't fund her lifestyle or bail her out of poor financial choices, but I would invest in her growth. I offered to pay for a coding boot camp, a practical skill that would open doors in today's economy. "Why would you help me after everything?" she asked suspiciously. "Because despite everything, you're my sister," I replied. "And I believe everyone deserves the chance to reinvent themselves." She accepted, and though the early weeks were rocky as she struggled with the technical concepts and the humbling experience of being a beginner, she gradually developed a genuine interest in the work. For perhaps the first time in her life, she was accomplishing something through pure effort rather than charm or parental intervention. Meanwhile, I was evolving too. The financial freedom from the acquisition allowed me to explore interests beyond work. I began volunteering with organizations that taught coding to underprivileged girls, finding fulfillment in helping others discover the passion that had saved me. I started dating again, this time with the confidence to choose partners who valued me for myself, not what I could provide. The most meaningful project I undertook was establishing a scholarship program for young women from disadvantaged backgrounds pursuing careers in technology. I named it after my grandmother Margaret, who had always seen my potential when no one else did. During this year of transformation, I learned several profound truths about family healing and self-worth. First, that confrontation, while painful, is sometimes necessary for growth. Had I continued to swallow my feelings and maintain the status quo, nothing would have changed. The explosive revelation of my success, while not how I would have chosen to address our family dynamics, forced conversations that were decades overdue. Second, that we cannot change others, only ourselves and our responses to them. My parents were doing the best they could with their limited emotional tools. Jenna had been shaped by the same dysfunctional system that had marginalized me. Understanding this didn't excuse their behavior, but helped me respond with compassion rather than bitterness. Third, that boundaries are not punishments, but necessary protections. By clearly defining what I would and would not accept in my relationships, I created space for healthier interactions. Some of those boundaries included not discussing my finances, not allowing guilt trips about helping family, and requiring basic respect for my time and choices. Fourth, and perhaps most importantly, that my worth was never dependent on my family's ability to see it. The validation I had sought for years could ultimately only come from within myself. My success hadn't made me more valuable, it had simply made it harder for others to dismiss me. Grandmother Margaret, now approaching her 85th birthday, summed it up perfectly during our monthly lunch. "You spent your childhood trying to be seen," she said. "Now you're learning that being seen by others matters far less than truly seeing yourself." Today, our family functions with a delicate balance that would have seemed impossible a year ago. My parents make conscious efforts to treat me with the same consideration they automatically give Jenna. Jenna is slowly developing her own identity separate from being the favorite child, and I am learning to accept love that comes with limitations while celebrating the unconditional support I've found in chosen family, like Aisha and my grandmother. The $12 million that sparked this transformation sits mostly untouched in carefully managed investments. Beyond funding the scholarship program and making modest improvements to my lifestyle, the money's greatest value has been the freedom it provides. Freedom to choose relationships based on mutual respect, rather than need freedom to pursue work that matters, rather than just pays bills, and freedom to finally prioritize my own well-being after decades of being an afterthought. If you're watching this and recognizing patterns from your own family, remember that your value isn't determined by how others treat you. Sometimes the people who should love us most fail to see our worth, but that doesn't diminish who we are. Have you ever had to stand up for yourself with family? How did it change your relationships? Share your experiences in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories about finding strength through life's challenges. Remember, sometimes the family we create means more than the family we're born into. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it helps you find the courage to write your own.